Okay, so today, as you know, every Monday is the Alaere Book Club. We're still reading from Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton, and this is how far we've gotten together. So I may read some of this like on my own, and I encourage y'all to do so too. And then we'll come back and read next week, and then we'll be starting a new book for the month of November. But before I get started, my name is Odemi Pesu. I am the founder and CEO of an art and fashion brand called Alaere Lifestyle. And so every time I go live, I like to do a little bit of incense. Set the tone, set the vibe with like some positivity. And as we wait for people to join, I'm gonna just get that started. Okay, turn the music up just a little bit. And then I also like to set an intention as well. Like I feel, okay, this is, okay. I feel like we should also set an intention as well. Yeah, every time I come on live, I'm like, you know what, I want this to be a high vibrational space. Let me move back a little bit. I want this to be a high vibrational space, and I want, you know, when people come on my live, I want them to leave feeling elevated. I want them to feel like, I don't know, like something good came into their life through interacting with me. I think that the world has a lot of negativity in it, and so if my space online can be a source of positivity for people, then I'm doing something right. Okay, so yeah, I think today's intention, I always come up with these like on the spot, so let's see. For today's intention, I want to set the intention of expansion. And I just feel like, yeah, the intention of expansion is a good intention for today. So yeah, before we get started reading the book, I think, yeah, let's all have the intention to continue expanding our minds and our spirits with positivity. Okay, so let me put that over there. Okay, wait, let's see the chat. Hey, Diplomatic Cigar. What's up? Okay, so Easy 2008 says, hi beauty. Hi, thank you for joining, y'all. So we're reading from Your First Million. This was the Alaere Book Club choice for October. And so this is how far we are in the book, but the month is almost over. So I do encourage you, if you're, you know, vibing with this book, to get it on your own and read. Easy 2008 says, where are you from? I'm from Atlanta. I'm Nigerian American though. So first one in my family born in America, first gen. And let's see, Agnea 1010 says, hi, welcome. Okay, so before I get started, let me turn down the music just a little bit. Before I get started on reading this book, I do want to share from my book, A Force of Nature. Okay, wow, the chat is really popping off. Hey y'all! So Cristiano Rodriguez says, hola Brazil, hi! I only know like a few Portuguese words. Obrigado, is that how you say thank you, right? Okay, Samuka says, hi, I'm from Brazil, but I came to say that I watch all your videos. Wow, thank you! That actually makes me so happy, wow. Agnea 1010 says hi again. Hi. Okay, Diplomatic Cigar says expansion. Period. Interesting topic. A mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimension. Okay, with the bars. You should write your book that you were talking about. I didn't forget that you mentioned that. You have a way with words, if I do say so myself. Okay, so I do want to read a little bit from my book before we get into today's book, but I'm really happy to have y'all here. Don't forget to subscribe. I invite y'all to subscribe. I do the Alaere Book Club every Monday, and so far, like, the past few days, especially last week, I was live painting every day because currently I'm creating some stuff for my fashion line. But okay, so I'm gonna just read a quick snippet from my book, Force of Nature, which you can get this on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Nook, Waterstones, a few different bookstores across the globe. But I'm going to just read the intro from the one chapter, That Which Carries Us. So my book, if you are unfamiliar, because some of y'all literally have been here since when I first published my book in 2021, and I am in the process of writing my second book, but I felt like, I don't know, I just feel like a lot of the themes and the thematic elements that I incorporated into this book when I first wrote it are really themes that I've been engaging with in this part of, or in this chapter of expansion, I should say, in my life. And I do think that, you know, writing a book about decolonization of mind, body, and spirit, and sovereign expression of divine feminine energy, I think it was kind of like a novel topic to explore in 2021, but we've seen so much of this conversation expand. I know, expansion, that's the theme of today, but we've seen a lot of this conversation and this discourse take like a new life in the last few years. And I think right now we are seeing a societal revolution, a rebellion of sorts, which I'm gonna get into a little bit more later in today's live. Hi Bomo, welcome. So Wind, this is from the Wind chapter, this is just the intro. And this is what I wrote. Wind is powerful in the way it transports us to new discoveries and imaginings of who we can become, what we can do, how we can evolve. The wind kisses our backs and tells us to take a step forward, even when we believe ourselves to be unready to move on. We must become the wind on our backs and carry ourselves to that which we desire, closing our eyes and surrendering to the motion of the universe. Releasing control is how we learn to fly. So that's just a quick snippet. I highly recommend that you go check out my book, Force of Nature by Odemi Fesu. And yeah, so I felt like it was important to kind of start with that intro because, like I said, expansion, and I really want to talk about expanding our minds. I think it was Einstein that said imagination is more important than knowledge. Now, depending on who you ask, people might disagree with that statement, but our imagination is what kind of puts us in the same essence as God consciousness. Because if you really think about it, if you are a believer in God and our divine creator, the divine creator that created the world, that created all of us, right, had to imagine us before creating us. And I think when humans, when we use our imagination, when we expand our ability to imagine new, just new expressions of ourselves and new things for the world, we're stepping into God consciousness and in alignment with that divine identity. So yes, reading books and expanding your mind does put you in that space of divinity, if you ask me. Okay, so OJ, interesting question. OJ asked, do you think body count determines a woman's worth? No, I don't. Okay, so moving on. That is my answer. No, I don't. Do you think that a man's body count determines his worth? You know, these are very interesting questions that people ask about women, but you know, I'm gonna come back to that kind of topic about like the patriarchy and stuff like that later in the live, but we're gonna get started reading Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton. So if you haven't been joining on the Alaere Book Club, you need to subscribe because we do this every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. But essentially, Arlen Hamilton is a multimillionaire venture capitalist. She's a founder, a CEO of Backstage Capital, which funds multi-millions of dollars into the businesses of underrepresented founders. So right now we are on, sorry, I'm like changing the vibe a little bit with the music. But right now we're on chapter 7, Owning the Wealth You Create. So Pretty much I'm going to be reading from the book and then sharing, interjecting with some of my thoughts. And I encourage y'all to also interject with some of your thoughts and your reactions to what she's saying in the book. And yeah, so let's get started. So chapter 7 says, owning the wealth you create. Hold on, let me get a little bit comfy. Okay. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, hired Dr. Jolly as a financial expert to help rebuild the city. She explained how the Black community in New Orleans was disproportionately affected by the natural disaster due to the differences in generational wealth that history had dealt them. Dr. Jolly noted, New Orleans is the oldest inhabited place in the country. Black people were free before they were enslaved. We, at this time of the storm, we had 5 generations living there. We were 3 generations in for wealth and ownership, but the majority of Americans that lived there were 5 generations in. She explained that it takes 3 generations to build legacy wealth and only 1 generation to lose it. So if you're in that 3rd generation, she said, you're at a tipping point, which means that when the storm hits and you're not insured and you don't have a clear title, there's some issues with cash flow. But when you're 5th generation, it's paid for and it's insured. So because the Black community had been able to amass generational wealth for only 3 generations, they did not have the same kind of institutional foundations that the white community, 5 generations into building generational wealth, had. We can see similar patterns with women and the LGBTQ+ community. For a long time, women's access to wealth was dependent on the men in their life, due to laws barring women from owning property, accessing credit, trademarking products, and running businesses. Within the LGBTQ+ community, generational wealth has in the past been forfeited for the right to live authentically, because many LGBTQ+ citizens were disowned by their family upon coming out. So some of them are just at the beginning of their journey. They're going to be the first generation to pass their wealth on. This is one of the reasons Dr. Jolly believes it is so important that our generation participates in wealth building and creating legacies. We now have the opportunity to do what previous generations could not. Okay, so just read a bunch and we're gonna pause real quick and just talk about that. But let me check into the chat. Okay, so Dan Mino says, you look truly divine and angelic. Thank you, that's so kind. Thank you, Dan. So if you're just joining in, we're reading from Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton, and we're on chapter 7. And so just now we're in a chapter where she's talking about owning the wealth you create, and she's just gone over a very, very brief history of generational wealth for Black Americans and for women. And this is why I do think that it's very important for women in the global community to learn about financial literacy. That's why I'm reading a book like this as a CEO, as a founder myself, wealth and a business on to my future kids and my future generations. Okay. Oh wow. Damino says you got that magic Naomi Campbell got. Oh, don't gas me too much, because I'm gonna start feeling myself on the line. The melanin glow, Damino says. Okay, thank you. I love Naomi Campbell, so best compliments. And if you're new, y'all, please subscribe. I love to have y'all here. We're really growing a high vibrational, conscious community, okay? And everything that I talk about here on this channel, it is art, it's fashion, and it's aesthetics, it's beauty, it's fun, it's great. But it is also centering 1, decolonization of mind, body, and spirit. 2, Black consciousness. And 3, our divine identity. Okay, so if all of those topics and themes resonate with you, I encourage you and invite you to be a part of the Alaere Lifestyle community. Okay, so let's get back to the book. Okay, so we now have the opportunity to do what previous generations could not. The more underestimated people are empowered to start investing, the more underestimated people will be invested in. In 2021, I started teaching an investor course online, and one of the things I've learned is that so many people don't realize they're already in the position to be an investor. They think they are on the other side of the fence from it, that it is something they can do in the future when they have made it. But actually, investments can be made with small amounts of money. One way Dr. Jolly advises people to do this is by investing in the businesses where you spend money. So drink your Starbucks, she says, but also own Starbucks stock. Or in other words, be the owner and not just the consumer. She says that in doing this, you are aligning your investments with the purchase patterns of whatever community you identify with, creating wealth that way. You don't have to be wealthy to begin building generational wealth. You just have to amend the vision you have of what an investor looks like, what kind of person an investor is. In the words of Dr. Jolly, we as African Americans are the only people in America who were first capital before we made capital. Ooh, I'm gonna read that again. We as African Americans are the only people in America who were first capital before we made capital. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to pause and we're going to get into that statement. But she goes on to say, and so when we look at business, it can't help but be personal. We came over here on the balance sheet and we are wealth. And we've been creators of wealth from the moment we got here. And so the goal for us needs to become wealth creators for ourselves. Think about that for a moment. Black people have been creating wealth for this country for generations. But we've been shut out from that wealth and encouraged by the mainstream to think that we aren't, as a group, wealth creators. We've created wealth for so many other people, not just historically, but culturally. How many people became rich from something that our community created? From our music to our fashion to our vocabulary. It is time for us to own the legacy of our own wealth and understand that it already belongs to us. Okay, this is some powerful stuff that we're reading here. So I'm gonna pause real quick and interject with some of my thoughts because, I mean, hello, that's the point of the book club, right? So if you don't know, my background is international political economy, and that's what I studied in undergrad at Brown University on a full ride, period. And then I pursued my master's in public affairs at Brown. And during that time, I really took the time to understand the legacies of slavery in this country and how that trickled down into socioeconomic upward mobility for African Americans. And I also looked at these same factors in other post-colonial societies, particularly in Nigeria and also I'd say in like Angola and parts of like Southern Africa. And I think what she said here, we as African Americans are the only people in America who were first capital before we made capital. I think that's very important to, understand. Now, I am a child of immigrants, but I'm a Black American. I was born here, I was raised here, I am an American. And I think, as a Black American, a first-gen Black American, I think I really have put a lot of emphasis on being able to create something of my own because I know how important that is here. And I know how many people in the Black community in the United States have not historically had access to starting their own businesses. And so it was really important for me to start my own business so I could have something concrete of my own to pass on to future generations in this country. And what she said about starting to invest, I highly recommend, especially a woman, to begin investing. The stock market is really not that hard to understand. Like, fun fact, when I first left corporate America, I had been working at a company that I had stock options in. And so when I left corporate to start my company, Alaere Lifestyle, check it out, www.AlaereLifestyle.com if you want to buy my art or my fashion designs. But when I left, and that was like, 3 years ago? Y'all, I was living off of stocks for a good 6-7 months. I would watch the market. I wasn't day trading, but I would watch the market, and before the company was acquired by a private equity firm and the stock prices plummeted, I was able to watch and kind of assess when the price of the stock was at its highest, and I would sell certain chunks and then live off of that for a couple of months, watch, sell certain chunks, live off of that for a few months. And I think that, like, looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, that was really something smart that I was doing. And I think a lot of young people could benefit, especially young women could benefit from investing. You know, I think consumerism is pushed on women in a really sick way, and women are taught to spend money in large sums as opposed to investing money in large sums. Like, it's very interesting that I think, you know, a lot of the education we get, especially the public education that we're exposed to in America, does not really give young people in general, women, men, you know, it does not really give young people the knowledge about how very real economic systems that affect everyone, you know, it doesn't give them the knowledge about how that works. And so I do encourage you to seek out that knowledge. There's a book I've been reading called How to Invest Like Warren Buffett, and it's a really short book. I have it on Kindle, but I would recommend that as an entry point into understanding the stock market. Kind of look at investment companies, look at the stocks that they buy and go from there as well. Or, you know, look into index funds. REITs are also a good thing, and REITs are basically like real estate stocks. Like I that's like the most simple way I can boil it down to. But I highly encourage young Black people, young Black women, to really build up on your financial literacy, because what we're seeing right now in the world is going to help. Okay, let's see. Hi, Luther Marshall. Okay, thank you for joining in the chat. Let's see what you wrote here. If you were to give a teacher or ask a school to make a class around practical economics and practical daily currency, what would you advise them? Oh, thank you. I love questions like this. Let me sip my water before I answer. Okay. So if I were to give a teacher or school a class around practical economic and daily currency, I would say right now, understanding the basics of micro and macroeconomics and how they impact your daily life, that is just something young people need to understand. Just like I would really start from the basic tenets of microeconomics, macroeconomics, and probably throw in a little smidge of behavioral economics so people can understand how, gosh, like let me really think about this. Behavioral economics really looks at how certain pockets of society, how they engage with the economy, and that is impacted by cultural practices, that's impacted by gender. So I would definitely really like carve out a section there so people can have a better understanding of why they engage with the economy in a certain way. Why do certain communities buy certain things and spend money on certain things? And I think when you have that understanding as a young person, you can kind of like, it kind of goes back to me to decolonization. You can take a step back and not be so easily manipulated by the push to be just a consumer instead of a wealth builder. And then what I said earlier about just having the basics of micro and macroeconomics, I think that that's just like really important to have as a foundation. So as someone that studied economics, I said this earlier, but that's what I studied when I was at Brown. And then like before my master's, also at Brown, that was public affairs, where I think public affairs was kind of like microeconomics, macroeconomics, but also policy. But yeah, I think just having an understanding of things like opportunity cost, sunken cost fallacy, understanding, wow, what does the Federal Reserve do when inflation is happening? Like being able to understand those concepts, I think can really empower young people to not live in the dark, essentially, and to be able to move with foresight, because pretty much what economists are able to do. I grew up wanting to be an economist. Like I worked at the World Bank briefly, and so this is really like what I wanted to do. But I think that, you know, using art and fashion as a way to have these conversations is a bit more creative, if you ask me. But I remember it was 2021, I think, when I first realized, oh my gosh, we're in a recession. Like, you know, everybody's like, oh, we're going into a recession. No, we've been in a recession. And why is that? Because the Federal Reserve, it was easy for me to understand that because one, me and my sister, we went out to eat pizza and I noticed that the pizza was like, I think $1.25 more expensive than it had been like literally a week ago. And so immediately I was like, why would they raise the prices? And usually when you understand things in microeconomics, you understand that consumers always absorb the cost of production. And these are things that more young people need to understand, especially if they decide to open a business. But that's another, that's another conversation. But because consumers absorb the cost of production, when you see that something has been raised in price, you can either think, okay, why would cost of production go up? So immediately I looked up, okay, has the Federal Reserve adjusted the interest rate in any way? And I noticed that they did raise the interest rates. And that's when ding, 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 it went off, like a light went off. I was like, okay, there's a recession either happening right now or coming. And so I say all that to say that I wouldn't have had that understanding and wouldn't have been able to kind of decide, okay, if a recession is happening in the next 3 years, how do I want to position myself? What technological advancements do I need to incorporate in my own business in order to be more competitive and things like that? That all came from my understanding of micro and macroeconomics. So Luther Marshall, if you're still here, I hope that answers your question. I get really passionate about this stuff. So yeah, like I would love, like honestly, I would love to do an economics workshop for young people to understand because yeah, economics is really important. Okay, let's see. Kim.ja says, OMG, you are beautiful. Hi from Iraq. Hello. Hello. Wow, all the way from Iraq? I'm honored. Thank you for joining. I hope you subscribe. I go live every single weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And so today, we are reading from Your First Million, and I'm also interjecting with my thoughts because I like to yap. I have a lot of thoughts. And just some thoughts from my journey as a CEO, as a founder, and as a scholar. And pretty much today's topic is about expansion of your mind and how that can be the most lethal weapon that you have in a society that really wants to subjugate certain pockets of society, namely women, Black people, people who are not white, and people who are women. Yeah, we're all going through it right now, and I think that the best way that we can arm ourselves is with knowledge about certain systems, about ways to create wealth and ways to insulate ourselves from the effects of what is happening in the world. Okay. So let's move on to chapter 8, owning your personal finances. Ooh, yes, love this topic because it's something that I've been like, I think personal finance, as much as like I love micro and macroeconomics, I don't think that like personal finance was something I really learned a lot about really until like my mid-20s. And I'm only in my late 20s, so it's like an ongoing thing. So let's see what Miss Arlen Hamilton has to say. In 2019, 59% of Americans lived paycheck to paycheck, meaning that they were one paycheck away from homelessness. Only 38% of Americans had an emergency fund, and that's according to the Charles Schwab Corporation in their 2019 Modern Wealth Survey. That's absolutely how it was for me for most of my adult life. Up until I was 34, I did not make more than $20K a year, once as little as $5,000 a year, and it was really hard to save any money at all. Creating a strong financial foundation for yourself is important, whether you plan to start a business or you just want to ensure that you have a financial safety net to get you through hard times. The year 2020 was a huge eye-opener in this respect. We learned that you never truly know what is around the corner. So many people found themselves suddenly unemployed as businesses struggled to deal with a worldwide pandemic that none of us could have seen coming. Even those people who thought of their jobs as secure realized that in times of crisis, we are all in a position to lose our jobs. So true. Oh my God. Unemployment affected almost every industry. and there were very few safe jobs. If you were an essential worker, you were at less risk of being let go or fired, but there was a much greater chance that exposure to the virus would leave you with a huge medical bill, or that you would be required to take sick leave or time off to quarantine without being paid. Never mind the fact that the virus could even leave you with any number of ongoing medical conditions that would affect your ability to work and therefore your future earning potential. Being 1 or 2 paychecks away from poverty when COVID hit meant that we were beholden to the government, who ultimately failed us. Yeah. We needed their bailout. We counted on it, but then it didn't help as much as it needed to, because the systemic inequalities and failures of government that created our situation in the first place were still there. If more people were able to have economic independence, we wouldn't have seen so many people suffer as much as they did. Okay, so I'm gonna pause real quick. Okay, so let's check into the chat. Hey y'all, welcome, welcome. If you're new, we are reading Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton. Okay, so Luther Marshall says, yes. Oh, that was like to my earlier question. Okay, something about memory retention would be nice. A few years out of college and I've forgotten almost everything. And okay, so I'm gonna come back to that comment. And then Nicolo Messina says, hi. Hi, Nicolo. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, Luther Marshall also says, what's that quote from Society is 6 meals away from collapse? Oh, yeah. Let's go back. I love that y'all are like actually enjoying this book, because I'm such a nerd. And like, I love reading books like this, and that's the whole reason why I was like, okay, if I'm gonna be reading this, this seems like an important book for other people to read. So I love that it's resonating with you. So Luther, if you get this book, Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton, just in case you want to cite it, this is the book if you want to take a screenshot. And so the quote is on page 64, and she says, in 2019, 59% of Americans lived paycheck to paycheck, meaning they were 1 paycheck away from homelessness. Only 38% of Americans had an emergency fund. And yeah, so that was that. Oh wait, but I think you were asking about like everyone is like 1 meal away from collapse. Is that the one? Up until 34. I think that's the, I think, let me know if that's the one that you were asking about, because I think that was the quote. That's the only quote I can think of. But she was citing the 2019 Modern Wealth Survey from the Charles Schwab Corporation. So I hope that helps. Okay, Sidan Tiwari says, hey, beautiful, hey. Hey love, what's up? Where are you guys tuning in from? So we had someone from Europe earlier, and that made me really happy, because like, I love Middle Eastern people. Like, I just love that we're building a global community here, and that makes me really happy. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Nigerian American, first gen. So yeah, a little bit about me. Okay, so right now, if you're just joining in, we're reading from Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton. Arlen Hamilton is a really successful venture capital firm founder. She has invested like so much money, millions of dollars, into companies founded by underrepresented founders. And I think that her story is really inspiring. She's just an inspirational person, because she went literally from poverty and homelessness to being a multimillionaire, hence Your First Million. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm trying to be a millionaire. So I want to build generational wealth for my family, especially as someone who was the first person in my family born in America. I want to chop the American dream. And I think we should all, you know, be able to do that. So yeah, hence the book choice. Okay, Sirat Tiwari says, well, I am just scrolling, but I got stuck in your beautiful eyes. Oh my gosh, stop. I'm gonna blush. Thank you. Kim Dokja says, this conversation was truly meaningful. I've learned so much. Thank you for sharing. I'm new in this channel. It's good. Thank you. Oh my gosh. You know, every time I join the live, like I always pray beforehand and I'm like, God, I just want you to speak through me. I want this to be a channel that makes an impact in someone's life. And so hearing you say that, Conductra, like that makes me feel so happy. It really does, because that means that I'm honoring what God has called me to do. And I do believe that this is my purpose. And Conducta, I encourage you to check out my book. It's called Force of Nature by Odemi Pesu if you want to take a screenshot. Um, Everything that you want to know about what I stand for is in that book. And I'm writing my second book and launching my magazine this month. So I'll talk more about that. Stay tuned. Like, so it's what? We're 35 minutes into the live. I'll take a quick breather like a little bit later and tell you guys more about the magazine, but just because I have so many thoughts that I don't want to be censored on YouTube and on these social media platforms. But let's just say that my magazine is for the women who rebel and those of us who don't want to be subjugated by the patriarchy, okay? So yeah, more to come on that. Eric Markison, hello, welcome. Okay, so Eric Markison says, what is your heritage? I am Nigerian. That is my cultural background. I was born and raised in America, so I was the first one in my family born in the United States. And so I am what some people would call a third culture kid, because I grew up in a very Nigerian household with Nigerian culture, Nigerian food. I grew up around a lot of immigrants, and I also grew up around a lot of Black Americans, a lot of other, first-gen kids whose parents were from Bosnia or parts of Latin America as well. So my family always called my friend group the United Nations, because growing up I had so many different friends. Like I had friends who their whole generations were from Georgia. Had friends whose family immigrated from Romania. So I am a proud first-gen American. What about you, Eric? What about you? What's your heritage? Okay, so if you're just joining in, we're continuing to read Your First Million. I feel like we're having a really good conversation today, and I'm happy y'all are here. Okay, so let's get back to the book. Where do we even start? Or stop, I mean. Let's see. Oh, yes. If more people were able to have economic independence, we wouldn't have seen so many people suffer as much as they did. This is why taking ownership of your financial situation is so incredibly important. Whether you are the founder of a startup, you work for a large company, or you work for yourself, you need to be the CEO of your own finances. So true. To do this, you need to begin with intentionality. The amount of money we have can often feel completely out of our control. With bills increasing every year and wages remaining stagnant, it is important to wrestle that control back. One way you can take control and create a strong financial foundation for your life is to diversify your income so that you are not completely reliant on one income stream. Oh wait, actually I just realized, Luther, I did not answer your question about memory retention. So a way that I've been able to continue remembering stuff that I learned in graduate school, which when did I graduated grad school in 2020. And then graduated college in 2018. And the reason why I'm still able to remember all this stuff about economics and all of that is because I keep reading. I always try to read one article or so a day. I follow news outlets like 60 Minutes, CNBC, BBC. I just try to stay up to date with the economics and that industry and everything. And so I also take a lot of notes. I try to give myself some type of homework or a syllabus to anchor myself around every month, and that helps me retain. And then I talk about it. I try to find ways to have conversations about what I've read and what I'm learning with people who are also interested, and I think that helps with the memory retention. So I hope that helps. What did you study in college? Kim Doctor says, I will read it. Thank you. And Eric Markison says, I am Norwegian and English and French and Scottish and some other countries from Europe. Oh my gosh, you're the United Nations. Do you speak French? let's see, how do I say that? Je parle français un peu parce que je l'ai étudié pendant le lycée, l'université, mais maintenant, j'ai besoin de plus pratiquer avec une personne francophone. So yeah, I'm curious, do you speak French? Because like I said, j'ai besoin de plus pratiquer. Okay, so I'm happy to have like such a diverse group of people here. That makes me so happy because even though a lot of what we're talking about, because Arlen Hamilton is a Black woman. I'm not sure if she's part of the LGBTQ plus community, but she does talk about that in the book too. But even if you're not from a historically marginalized community, I do think that the topics in this book can resonate with everyone. Okay, Eric says, I am American. I don't speak any languages other than English. Totally okay. I studied French in high school and in college. It was part of my degree. But yeah, I want to learn how to speak like up to 3 languages. That is my goal. Okay, so let's see. One way you can take control and create a strong financial foundation for your life is to diversify your income so that you are not completely reliant on one income stream. Figuring this out for myself was huge, especially in the risky industry of venture capital. I have always been curious about other people's income streams, especially wealthy people who tend to have multiple sources of revenue. I read in a few books and articles that most millionaires have at least 7 income streams. I'm going to interject real quick because I've heard people talk about taking biblical knowledge and applying that to your finances. And I don't know if it was in Proverbs that I read this. I'm a believer in Christ, so I do reference the Bible sometimes, but I think it was in Proverbs, but it did, because I remember like literally writing this down one time when I was studying my Bible. But the Bible does also encourage that. I think it was King Solomon. Oops, sorry, all this incense. I think it was King Solomon that encouraged people to have at least like 7 income streams. Fact check that, but this is something that I also saw in the Bible. So she's not wrong. And I do think that God has called us to live in abundance because this is such a beautiful world that we live in. Why would God want us to suffer? You know what I'm saying? So we have the tools, we have the natural resources, we have our most important resource, our mind, and also the greatest gift, love. So I think when you can combine all of that together, you can create wealth. Okay, Eric Ferguson says lovely hand gestures. Thank you. I guess I use my hands a lot. Diplomatic Cigar says you are the female Einstein and Picasso in one. Thank you, thank you. I was very precocious growing up. So I literally took the SAT when I was 12. And I took college classes at Duke all through middle school and high school. So I really do love learning. And I was like, is that weird? So I actually was looking up, is being gifted, because I was in the gifted program growing up. I was like, is that neurodivergent? Because I do know my mind, I sometimes find it hard to relate to people sometimes because I'm like, I really genuinely am intensely curious. I think this is so fun, So thanks for that. Eric Markuson says, I took German class in 9th grade and didn't learn much. Yeah, German, that sounds very hard. I once dated a German man. I did. And I think the only thing I learned from that relationship was Ich liebe dich, which is I love you. So if you ever want to say I love you to a German person, you can say that. Eric says, I am in San Diego and I speak a little Spanish. Ooh, period. I was in San Diego for a little bit. What part of San Diego? I was in Del Mar for the most part. Was not a fan of Pacific Beach. Lucadia, it was okay. And Gaslamp Quarter, there was a shooting outside of my Airbnb. But other than that, I really liked Del Mar. Diplomatic Cigar says, amen. Yeah. Read the Bible, y'all. Proverbs, that's the tea. That is some wisdom up in there, okay? So let's get back to the book. Okay, so yeah, we're on page 66, Your First Million. I read in a few books and articles that most millionaires have at least 7 income streams. Knowing this, I set out to make sure that I was reducing my risk and securing my future by setting up multiple streams of income. The way people make money now looks a lot different than how it used to. The gig economy, short-term or freelance jobs, 0-hour contracts, jobs in which you are never guaranteed a specific number of working hours, and other flexible ways of working have been both freeing and frustrating for workers. For some, these different systems offer the flexibility for people to work the hours they need when they need to, while for others, the arrangements mean never knowing for sure what their salary will be month to month, so people have to get 4 jobs to ensure that they'll make enough money to pay their bills. Oh yeah, and no health insurance. Yeah, that's also a thing. Okay, anyway, so yeah, I had to interject. Wait, let's see the chat. So Eric says, I know some Spanish words. I remember each division. Yeah, like that's all I know. I don't know any Spanish, unfortunately, just French. I would love to learn Arabic, although Arabic is like so hard. And I would like to learn Portuguese. Kim Doctor says, where can I read this book? I think it is so useful. Yeah, okay, so Your First Million. I just bought this at my local Barnes & Noble, but let me know if you have access to Amazon in Iraq, or if you don't have access to Amazon, try to Google and see if you can find this book. And if you can't find it anywhere that can ship to you, Kim Doctor, email me and I'll figure out a way to like get you the book. Okay, so Eric says upper class Del Mar. It was a little bougie. I can't like I'm a little bougie. Okay, I am. But I really liked it. You should go check out Les Artistes in Del Mar. I stayed there for a hot minute and it was like right on the beach, and it was just like this really indie, cool, artistic inn owned by this really sweet lady from Thailand. Although she's like a real estate investor, like she's an architect and everything, super cool. But yeah, definitely check that out. I live in Point Loma Heights neighborhood in San Diego. I've heard of Point Loma. I've definitely heard of that. I never got around to visiting there. I've heard that they have a lot of Portuguese people though. You are blessed with flawless hands. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so let's get back to the book. Some of you may have had multiple income streams for most of your working life. My mother had a couple herself when she was working her day job as a sales executive at a major telecom company, came home, fed her 2 kids, and then headed out to her night shift at the 7-Eleven. The point of having multiple income streams is that they give you something to fall back on. Also, y'all, make sure you subscribe and make sure you give this a thumbs up if you're enjoying this live, because it helps push my live to more people. And as you can see, I like to say that we are raising our vibration here. We're expanding our minds. So let's try to get other people to join the lives. So yeah. Do that, help me out. Okay, so back to the book. I just had to interject. I was like, hold up. The point of having multiple income streams is that they give you something to fall back on. In 2020, one part of my income came from the release of my first book, It's About Damn Time. To launch the book, I had scheduled a tour. I would be speaking in cities all over the United States, celebrating the book and joining Backstage Capital for a tour in which we plan to give out investments to companies and founders at every date. Unfortunately, the book was set to be published on May 5th, 2020, and by the time we got the stay-at-home order that March, I had already been canceling events as my main priority was always going to be health and safety for both myself and people coming to the events. It became clear very quickly that the tour was not going to happen. Without those speaking engagements and book sales, I personally lost out on roughly 6 figures. Yo, I totally, like, that was so intense. I totally relate to this, y'all. When I launched my first book, Course of Nature, I published this book in 2021. So it was still the pandemic. And I was so sad because I wanted to do like a whole launch party. I wanted to do a whole tour. Like this book, I put blood, sweat, and tears into this, and like I just didn't even really get to do everything I wanted to do with it at launch. And so that really sucked. But I still am happy that I've been able to do like different events here and there in Texas at Brown University, and like I still want to do more book talks and more book signing events and more public lectures and things like that. So if you do work, just a quick plug, if you want me to come to your school, your university, your company, let me know by emailing me at team@AlaereLifestyle.com, which is in my description. You can send me an email and request me for a speaking engagement for my book. But okay. Eric says, hi, I am attracted by your intellect and your education background. Thank you. Merci, monsieur. I appreciate that. I do think that an educated woman is the sexiest thing. The sexiest thing that you can be. I actually talked about that in my inaugural issue of my magazine, Alaere Manifesto. I have an essay, or an article, I should say, called Foucault or Fendi. And in that essay, or article, whatever you want to call it, I just essentially talk about the false dichotomy pushed by the patriarchal systems that wish to subjugate women. And I talk about this false dichotomy that says that a woman cannot be beautiful and she cannot be smart. And I'm like, well, that is not true. Like, it's just not true. And I think that, I've seen a lot of harmful rhetoric that tells women, like, if you want to be feminine, don't work certain jobs, don't go to law school, don't go to medical school. And I'm like, baby, we all have feminine and masculine energy. We all have it. And even though I talk often about divine feminine power, being feminine does not mean that you have to be dumb. The two are not the same. They are not like interchangeable, And yeah, so like I feel like, growing up, I was always raised by my mom and my dad to invest in my mind. My dad always said, you are an eagle. These little boys are chickens, okay? And like eagles, what do eagles do? They soar. And I feel like more young women, I want them to be able to empower themselves with the knowledge it takes to soar. A smart woman can do anything. She really can. And I mean, obviously, I'm a former pageant queen. I did Miss Rhode Island. I model on the side, and so I love beauty. I love aesthetics and stuff like that. But I do think that having beauty and brains, which is what I talked about in my essay and my magazine, Alaere Manifesto, which we'll talk more about that later in the live, but like having beauty and brains is a very lethal combination for a woman to have. And so if you're seeing all of this harmful rhetoric on the internet of women telling you, don't go to school, just get a man is not a plan. And let me remind you that some of the most successful men are also with women who are very, very intelligent and who have invested in themselves. Even Lauren Sanchez. I'm not like a stan of Jeff Bezos or whatever, but let's use her for an example. Lauren Sanchez was a journalist and a pilot. Amal Clooney, the wife of George Clooney, is also a human rights activist and lawyer for the UN. Like, I could go on and on and on and on, but if you feel like this is really a message for my young woman watching right now, or who may watch the replay. If you are finding yourself around men who think that if you're educated, that doesn't make you attractive, those are not the right men for you. Any man that wants you to forego your education, that wants you to abandon your financial independence and autonomy and agency in order to be with him, is a man that wants to control you and a man that wants to eventually abuse you. Maybe not physically, but psychologically or financially. And so the best way to protect yourself against that is to arm yourself with knowledge. And I highly also recommend reading some Robert Greene books. Kind of understand how people, specifically, the 48 Laws of Power. I highly recommend all women read that book. Okay, Kim Doctor says agree. Yeah, like girl, you get it because we come from cultures where, you know, I mean, Iraq and Nigeria have things in common. Like we definitely come from cultures where I think in certain parts, women are not encouraged to pursue knowledge because it makes us a threat to the patriarchal systems that run our countries. And I think we need women who are smart. We need women who are investing in their minds. Okay. Um, Eric says, when you were 12 years old, you were probably smarter than me and most college graduates. I mean, when I was 12, like, I'm gonna hype myself real quick, let y'all know my credentials, okay? When I was 12, I mentioned I took the SAT through this program called Duke Tip, which if you're young and you're watching this, I definitely recommend doing that. I mean, just try it out. My mom made me because I was in the gifted program and they like were talking about, oh, you know, do this. And so I took the SAT and I got a 1660. That was back when it was out of 2400. So I got a 1660. And then that's when I started taking classes at Duke University. And that's like really when, so I was taking class, well, no, my first class was at Davidson College. I took a creative writing class when I was 12. And then from 13 on to like 15 or 16, I was taking classes at Duke University. And those classes were international relations, criminal trial advocacy. I wanted to be a lawyer. And then, what was the other one? Democratization in the Middle East. So that was around the time the Arab Spring was happening. And I think like being precocious and being tapped into what was happening in the world at that age is why I'm able to be where I am now. And so I don't think it's ever too early if you're young and you're watching this, because I do have some young people who tune in every now and then, like 9 years old, 13 years old. But I really do think it's important to start investing in your mind and in your knowledge and in your cultural capital, your social capital at a very young age. And the best way to do that is through reading, like just read. So yeah, I'm a proponent of literacy. Eric says, I never was a college student, but I was once thinking about being in a city college. Hey, you know, still go for it. Like if that's something that you still want to do, I believe in higher education. I wish it was more accessible in the United States. I went to Brown on scholarship, on a full scholarship. Questbridge, quick plug. If you're in high school and you're, you know, trying to figure out how am I going to afford college, Questbridge is a really great academic scholarship. And I also received a different scholarship called Ron Brown, which is for African American students. So I applied to these. If y'all want me to talk more about my like academic journey in a different live, let me know. Maybe I'll do a poll on the I'll do a post or something on like the community side of my channel. You know, I just started going live, guys. Like, is you something that I'm doing. But yeah, I can talk more about that. Okay, Kim Doctor says, I have college tomorrow. It's already night, but I like this channel. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so happy for you, Kim Doctor. Like, I'm so happy that you are receiving value from these kind of conversations. And I hope you subscribe. Tell your friends too, you know, if you have people that you think would benefit from this, because there is so much more to come. I also talk about my art. Some of my art is here in the background as well. Eric says Brown University is impressive. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was not easy, but I definitely don't think I would be where I am without that Brown degree. Like, that definitely changed my life for sure. Okay. Excuse me. Oh my gosh. I think it's the insides. But let's continue reading the book. I just like to share some of, you know, my background so y'all can know me a little bit better and understand, like, one, the credentials and my background, because I do think there's a lot of people who come on the internet purporting themselves as experts in certain things, and I'm like, maybe it's the academic in me, but I'm like, can you cite your sources, please? Or like, why should I believe you? Like, why should I trust you? And so I hope that by sharing a little bit about like my education background, my professional background as a founder, and everything I've done, I hope that it can like shed some light on who I am, why you can trust my expertise in certain things, and also it can inspire those of you who are young and like aiming to expand your mind and your options through education. Kim Doctor says, yeah, sure, my friends will like this. Thanks. Eric says, I never heard of a 12-year-old Brown student. Yeah, I went to Brown when I was 17. I did classes at Duke when I was 12, around that age. Okay, so let's get back to the book. If speaking engagements and book sales had been my only income, I would have been completely screwed. But by this point, I had 7 separate income streams to rely on. Here are my current income streams in no particular order. So I bookmarked this page, so take some notes, y'all. Because I was like, wow, she's onto something. Okay, so here she says, my salary, number 1, my salary as the managing partner of Backstage Capital and the owner of Arlen Was Here, LLC. Salary is the main source of income most of us count on to pay bills and buy food. And it tends to be the one that is most consistent from month to month. But that salary keeps coming in only so long as some company keeps paying it. As we have seen, companies can go out of business, downsize, and let people go. If you're ever in that position, I have been, you'll be happy to have another income stream to fall back on, even if it is only enough to cover the cost of gas to get to your next job interview. Number 2, my second income stream comes from my publishing deals. This includes the advance that I receive when I make a book deal, which usually comes in 4 parts over approximately 2.5 years. Once the book is released, as long as I sell enough to earn my advance, I then receive a percentage from book sales. This might be a small amount of money coming in a bit at a time, but it could be an income stream that lasts for decades. The more books I publish and the more books I sell, the larger this income stream grows over time. Indie publishing can be a great option for some people. I'm a big fan, and it is something everyone should contemplate, considering how hard it can be to get a book deal from a publishing giant. Just a quick introduction, so I publish with an indie publishing company called New Degree Press. And I can talk more about that in another video, but royalties, publishing books, that does help. Like she said, it can be like a slower income stream, but it is something that you can earn money from for decades, and like it becomes more of a passive income stream. So that's why I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm totally going to publish my second book and keep publishing books and try to publish them every few years, because yeah, she's right, publishing is a way to make money, and that's also why, part of the reason why I'm launching my digital magazine, Alaere Manifesto, this month, because I think it's a way for me to own the distribution of my knowledge and my insight, but it is also an income stream that I can use to help expand, because that's today's theme, expansion. It is an income stream I can use to help expand Alaere Lifestyle, my company. Okay, so her third income stream she talks about is return on investments, ROI, and carry, short for carried interest. This is another source of income that over the next few years just may turn out to be the largest. I make investments via Backstage Capital's Assets Under Management, AUM, and I have a significant ownership in the umbrella entity that manages these investments. Number 4, speaking engagements form a large part of my income, which is why the cancellation of my tour was such a blow. However, once we pivoted to online events, I have continued to book interviews and fireside chats. I am now back to generating more than $1 million most years in speaking fees alone, in person and virtually. Wow, that's insane. Goals, honestly. That is honestly goals. Okay. Number 5, media deals, which cover anything from television to podcasts and etc. My Your First Million podcast is a great example. So is my fictional soap opera podcast, The Valley. Number 6, in 2020, I launched my first course, how to raise startup capital, which created another income stream of courses and digital products. I'd never created a course before, but I knew I had the expertise and the knowledge to create something that would be beneficial to those who wanted to learn. Not only that, I knew that my expertise was worth paying for. I loved building the course, and after such a positive experience, I knew it was time to start Arlen's Academy. Oh my gosh! I have a podcast called Alaere Academy, which I have not touched in 2 years, but I'm like, I just need a team. I need help. So this is making me happy. I'm like, okay, when I read stuff like this, it kind of makes me feel like, okay, I'm on the right track. But if you're a solo entrepreneur at the moment, like, I totally get it. You know, it can be tough. So don't let this discourage you. This is meant to encourage and to inspire and just like give you ideas, because Diplomatic Cigar said this in my live last week. He was like, Rome was not built in a day. So don't let this put too much pressure on you. It's just giving you ideas based off of her experience. And she did not create all of these income streams at one time. So I just wanted to interject and say that. I knew it was time to start Arlen's Academy. I could create and host more courses led by all the incredibly talented and knowledgeable people in my network. Not only is it a great resource for founders, it has been a great source of learning for me too. And number 7, another revenue stream is consulting. When I first started researching about the whole venture capital thing and what it was all about, I could not have known that people would eventually be paying me for my expertise, but that is exactly what has happened. My time, experience, and knowledge are worth money, and the time I spend working as a consultant gives me more experience, further adding to my value while also making me money. It is a win-win. For some of you, 7 income streams might seem like a reach, and I understand. I barely had one income stream for the first 35 years of my life. Try adding just one new income stream to start and see if you can add more over time. Think about a field where you are an expert. Is there a way to monetize that expertise? For example, let's say you know a lot about a particular area of business, such as IT or marketing. You could begin by building a free online course on the subject and encourage people to take it and leave reviews. You could then use this feedback to improve your course and eventually look to sell it to one of the many course websites available. Or let us say that you are super detail-oriented and organized. Great to add administrative tasks. If that is something you enjoy, advertise your skills and see if you can put in a few hours a week as a personal assistant for someone. We all have so much live admin that we have to deal with, and some people really despise doing it. So you may find yourself in high demand. This is one of the reasons I launched Runner, a job matching service at hirerunner.co. Okay, a lot of talking. Okay, let's continue. Let's see in the chat. Eric, I'm not understanding some of this. Okay, looks like you have a firm handshake. I don't know if I do. Do you feel powerful being smarter than me? I don't compare myself to other people. I just feel powerful being intelligent. I'm always comparing myself to the last version of who I was. If I can look back a year from now and be like, Odemi, you are smarter and wiser than past Odemi, that would make me feel better. But I don't think about other people in that regard. And I don't think you should either. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so we're on page 71 now of Your First Million, where we are reading from Arlen Hamilton. If you're new here, welcome. I hope you subscribe. We do the Alaere Book Club every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and I do go live every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And so today's conversation is really about this book, and I'm interjecting with some lessons from my own CEO journey as well. So be sure to subscribe and like this live. Okay. You should also ask yourself where your skill sets intersect. For example, you may be an accountant with a separate revenue stream coming from Etsy sales, because it turns out that not everyone who is good at figuring out profit margins can sew as well as you can. Some of the income streams will definitely take more work to begin with, and it may take some time to see a big return. Yeah, if there's anyone on this internet telling you you could just start a company and make $1 million in a month, they're lying to you. Okay, like things do take time. And that's okay. Like even in economics, when you look at the demand curve, there's a reason why there is a short run and a long run. And if that's going over your head, it's okay. Look up the demand curve and you'll see what I'm talking about. But what I mean by that is that, there are short term effects of certain economic activities, and then there are long term effects. And so sometimes it does take a couple of years, a few years to see a return on your investment, but don't let that discourage you. And like, as I say this to you, I'm literally saying this to myself too, because I started my company officially in 2023 and it is now 2025. And there's certain things that I've added over time, and like I'm still developing, but I feel like because I have a vision, it will all manifest at the right time. And I believe the same for you as well. If you're starting something, if you're starting a business, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like it is okay, like she said, if you want to add multiple streams of income, maybe start with adding one and, going from there. Okay, so back to the book. Remember, you are building an income stream for the future, and that can be worth the investment of time. Essentially what I just said. I want to make it clear that I am not suggesting you try to monetize all of your hobbies. Sometimes you do things just for fun, to relax, and you do not want to feel like you have to do that thing to a sellable standard. You need to be free to pursue things that may not be your strength, but you enjoy anyway. I don't want you side hustling your way to stress and burnout, so you have to know where to draw the line. Life is full of trade-offs, and you have to be able to ask yourself whether the money made is worth the stress involved. If it is going to take up all your spare time to make something you can sell only at a low price point, it's probably not worth it. Do look out for those opportunities to diversify your income with as little drain on your free time as possible. Remember, an extra revenue stream isn't another salary, so it does not need to be another full-time job. It could be something that you do only a couple of times a year. That's still a couple more opportunities each year to make money. I like that. Like I'm telling you, I'm learning from this book as well. This is my first time reading this, so like we're all learning together, and I vibe with what she just said. For some people, adding new revenue streams won't be possible right now. That's okay. It may be that between your day job and all your other responsibilities, you do not have time to create another revenue stream. But this is still something to keep in mind and to work toward. When it comes to money, I am a big proponent of autonomy and accountability. That doesn't mean you can't work for someone else. It means you are constantly and confidently taking ownership of your life and steering your life, not letting life happen to you, but participating in navigating the direction of your life. The wonderful thing about this is that you can start doing it, taking life by the horns in this moment. That means taking an audit of your resources, an audit of your desires, hopes, and aspirations. What do you have today? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to have? What tools and resources will you need to get from where you are to where you want to be? Okay, so that was a really good chapter. So that chapter is called Owning Your Personal Finances from the book Your First Million. And we have, I'd say, like half an hour left of today's live. But I just want to check in with y'all and see how y'all are enjoying the book. Like, if you feel called to, maybe, share what it is that you're liking about the book in the chat. And yeah, I'm curious to see what you are taking away from this. I think my greatest takeaway from her journey is just like the ability to build on your progress slowly but surely. I'm in my 20s and I think there's a lot of pressure. Like, okay, so I'm in my 20s and I know some people who have been on the, what is it called? That list Forbes does, 30 under 30. And it can put a lot of pressure. Gosh, the music got really loud. But yeah, it can put a lot of pressure to just like try to accomplish so much by 30. And I was watching an artist called Amy Sherrill, check her out. But I was watching her 60 Minutes interview yesterday, and I'm an artist myself. My business is an art and fashion brand. And I think sometimes subconsciously it can be easy to compare my career to more established artists and be like, man, like, why am I not doing that many, gallery shows as them and this and this. And I have to like check myself, like, oh, Demi, they are further along in their career. You just started. And Amy Sherrill, when she said that she was 51, I was shocked. I was like, wait, what? And so it just goes to show, like, if you're in your 20s, if you're in your teens, do not compare yourself to people who are like in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s who have been doing what you're just starting for like decades. And I know it's like duh, but social media, no one is coming on and saying, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. Da 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 da. Like, they're just sharing what they're doing, and it can be easy to really like start comparing yourself. And so I think that's like something that this book is reminding me of. Eric says, I enjoy admiring your hand gestures and your intelligence as a child. Eric, come close. Let me ask you something. Do you have a hand fetish? Because like, everybody has their thing, but like, you really be focusing on my hands. Like, is this a fetish? I'm curious. But thanks for engaging in the chat. It's just, sometimes I'm a little bit taken off guard. Like, about now, which one is this one? Okay. Chapter 9, owning your company. Okay, so we are now on page 74. So if you want to like read this book in your spare time, right now we are on, this is chapter 9. So we're in part 2 of the book. Okay, Eric says, I am attracted by your hand gestures. You didn't answer my question. It's just, I've never really heard that before. Okay, but anyways, y'all, so I want to keep going. I hope y'all are enjoying this. If you're enjoying this conversation and this book, let me know by liking this live and subscribing so that you can be a part of the Alaere Lifestyle community, where we focus on raising the vibrations of our minds and our spirits through art, fashion, and intellectual curiosity. Okay, so owning your company. So let's start. Also, I'm going to get a little bit comfy. Okay, let's talk about Mark Cuban, my collaborator, friend, and sole limited partner in the $6 million Arlen Was Here Investments, a fund within Backstage. Mark is an embodiment of the power of ownership. He created and owned his own companies and sold them for substantial wealth. His first venture sold for a staggering $20 million, and his second, even more impressively, sold for billions. That's insane. That's a dream of mine. Create a company that becomes a unicorn. I don't know if I would sell Alaere Lifestyle. I'm still building it, obviously, so it's like, I want to keep Alaere Lifestyle private, I think, but I do want to found a company that I can do with co-owners and sell eventually. Because when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, oh my God, that's so inspiring. Okay, so this ownership has given him tremendous power and leverage. It's a testament to why I stress the importance of ownership to all entrepreneurs. Mark's success isn't just about the monetary gains, but about the influence, political power, and quality of life he has managed to cultivate. This is what I want for you. This is what I want for all of us. When you own, you control. You decide what impact your work will have in the world, how it will shape society, and how it will contribute to your legacy. That is why the Arlen Was Here Investment Fund is so special to me. Mark and I built it with the core intention of fostering this culture of ownership, particularly within underrepresented founders. This is about wealth, yes, but it is also about leveling the playing field and equipping more people with the means to bring their visions to life. One of the best ways to cultivate power and income and begin building your legacy is through ownership of your own business. But as the old saying goes, it takes money to make money. I know that's right. And unless you are independently wealthy, you may not be able to afford the cost of getting a new business off the ground. This is where people like me come in. As a venture capitalist, I receive thousands of applications for funding every year. I am often asked, what do you look for in a founder? How do I get investment in my company? There are lots of ways to raise money for a company, and it is important to consider them all before you take on any investors. Never forget that anytime anyone invests money into your company, you are going into business with them. That is so true. I just took this class, I want to say like a week and a half ago. I took it at the University of Georgia has a small business development center, which if you're based in the US, you probably have something similar from a local university or like in your county. Like I highly recommend look up small business development centers. But I took this class and they were basically going over just how to navigate business loans and funding. And they were just talking a lot about like what makes people or new businesses attractive applicants to banks. And we did touch on the subject of venture capital and working with investors. And what she said is true. Like when people invest a substantial amount into your company, you usually do that in exchange for equity, which if you don't know what that is, equity is interchangeable with ownership in the business world. But there are people like angel investors and like different types of investor contracts where someone can invest in your company and it's just like you will pay them back, but maybe with a more lenient payback, timeline. So I think what she's saying is definitely true. Like try to figure out ways to maintain equity in your company while you are building it. There's another multimillionaire. She founded this company. It's a hair care company called She's a 10. I can't remember the name of the founder, but look up the company. She's a 10. She did a really cool interview. I think it was on CNBC. But basically, she talked about how she funded the expansion of her company all through her sales and just like reinvesting back into her company. So there are definitely ways to maintain full equity of your company as you expand. But sometimes that looks like taking on debt, which is leverage in the business world. And so you just have to like figure out what works for you. There are some people who they definitely want to found a company with the hopes of one day selling it or the hopes of one day going public and through an IPO and having multiple owners, people who invest in their stock. So kind of like think about what it is you want for your company before you tap into the venture capital world, because you can get billions of dollars, but if you look at a company like Nasty Gal, which I talk a lot about Nasty Gal, founded by Sophia Amoruso, and she essentially started Nasty Gal flipping vintage clothing, customizing it, selling it on eBay, and that turned into a global multinational brand. But I think what her downfall was with that company going bankrupt is because it got so inflated with venture capital funding that they could not pay it back at the rate that was expected for investors. So Arlen is very correct. Like if you allow people to invest in your company, you gotta have to give them something. So let's see. Eric says, these are very interesting comments, Eric. I'm over twice as old as you and you have me in the palm of your hands. Very interesting. Do you enjoy teaching old people? I enjoy teaching everybody. Yeah, I'm like such a theater kid. At heart. But yeah, no, I just like teaching. I love teaching. I want to one day go back and get my PhD. So yeah, I like teaching everyone. And I hope that y'all are learning some insights from this book. For this reason, it is important to really consider not only how much investment you need, but who you take investment from. Would you go into business with just anyone? No. If you already know them, you would think long and hard about how going into business would affect your relationship. If you don't know them, you would want to find out a lot about them before taking such a big risk. It is the same with investment. The reason your source of funding is important can be summed up in one word: equity. Your equity is how much ownership you have of the company. Every time you accept money as investment, you give away a piece of your equity or potential future equity. And you need to look ahead and think about whether the money being offered is worth what you are giving up in terms of ownership. If you engage in many fundraising rounds, the ownership of your company will be split so many times that you no longer own the majority of your company. This means that you are no longer able to make decisions about your company without consensus, and you no longer receive the majority of the returns down the road if your company is bought by a larger company or a group of investors. This is what is known as an exit. I really love this kind of stuff. As you can see, I'm like, oh, very interesting. When it comes to raising capital, there are multiple routes you can take. Some are more accessible, some are more risky, and some more conventional than others. There is no right or wrong way to fundraise. It just depends on your financial situation, your business plan, and your goals. A lot of the time, it is also dependent on your network, which is one of the reasons that underestimated founders have struggled to get a foot in the fundraising door in the past. As I mentioned earlier, the first stop on the fundraising journey is often the friends and family round, which basically means that you ask a certain number of your friends and family members to invest in your idea. Okay, so I'm seeing some action in the chat. 12 years old and brilliant. I'm not 12. Eric, I'm not 12. Ooh, I'm not 12. I'm in my late 20s. I think you misunderstood my earlier discussion about what I was doing in my preteen years. But anyways, so back to the book. The amount raised at this stage varies. Also, I'm going to change the music just a little bit. Okay. The amount raised at this stage varies. Oh, actually, no, let me go back. As I mentioned earlier, the first stop on the fundraising journey is often the friends and family round, which basically means that you ask a certain number of your friends and family members to invest in your idea. The amount raised at this stage varies, depending on how many of your friends and relatives want to invest in your idea and how much they can afford. Unsurprisingly, this is where we see the stark difference between underrepresented founders and founders who come from wealthy families or who have connections to other people with wealth. Oh my gosh, we have literally just seen this. I can't remember what the company is called, but Bill Gates, his daughter just founded a company, and there's a lot of discourse like in the venture capital world and in the business world right now about why she's even going through a fundraising, round, but that's another conversation. But essentially, she got investments from Hailey Bieber, Kris Jenner, and she's just getting all these investments, these high-profile investments. And I think from the discourse I've been seeing online, it's kind of irritating people because, like what Arlen is saying, a lot of underrepresented founders just don't have access to that. And people are like, if you're Bill Gates' daughter, why not just ask your dad for money? Like, those people who are investing in your company could be investing in more revolutionary, more novel, more innovative ideas. So this is just the discourse I've been seeing online. My opinion is that this is something I definitely also witnessed when I was at Brown. I come from more of like a middle class background, I guess I could say. And, especially like being a child of immigrants, a lot of whatever clout my dad's family, my mom's family have in Nigeria did not translate over to here, America. And so if you're first gen, if you don't come from wealth, it can be more intimidating to go through venture capital. And I would notice like kids I went to Brown with who were literally raising millions of dollars from their dorm room. And I was like, how is this even possible? But then I would do some digging. I'm like, oh, duh, your dad is like a VP of Volvo, or your mom is on the board of Oracle or something, And so don't let that discourage you. I think that we are in the age of the underdog, and I highly recommend just keep arming yourself with knowledge. And just, network. I think that my tips on networking as a founder, now I will say that networking has been easier because I'm plugged into that Brown alumni network. But if you're young enough to be like applying to colleges right now, definitely consider, and you want to be a business owner. If you're applying to college and you want to be a business owner one day, my advice would be look at schools with a strong alumni network in the industry that you want to enter and start connecting with those alumni now, maybe reaching out, seeing if you can intern or you can have like a 20-minute coffee chat with them. And what I noticed, like especially in my early 20s, is that most people actually do want to take time to pour into younger generations. And for Gen Z, it makes us stand out a bit more because, Gen Z has a bad rep as being like lazy and entitled and all of this stuff. Which, I don't know. I mean, I had my own wahala that I had with my younger Gen Z interns. Like, one of my interns ghosted me, and I was like, damn, like, y'all really don't like to work, huh? I'm like oldest Gen Z, so I'm like Gen Z older sister or whatever. But, like, I just feel like if you have something that you want to do, try to find somebody who has done it already. Use LinkedIn. Just reach out to them and see, if they'll respond. But that can be a way to start getting your foot in the door, especially if you're like, I don't know anybody who can invest money in me or invest mentorship in me or whatever. Like, definitely use the platforms that we have to your advantage. Okay, so back to the book. Unsurprisingly, this is where we see the stark difference between underrepresented founders and founders who come from wealthy families or who have connections to other people with wealth. Some of those founders have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars at this stage just by pitching to the people in their network who have capital to spend. For most of us, though, this is an impossible ask. At the start of my journey, I sure did not have any friends or family who could casually invest $10,000 into an idea, let alone 10 of those people. Same. Beyond being inaccessible for many, the friends and family round is also risky. When you ask an investment fund to finance your company, they absolutely know what they are getting into. They crunch the numbers, they know the odds, and they are prepared for the risk. They have little emotional connection to you, and you have little emotional connection to them, besides wanting to make them their money back. If you are going to ask for investment from your friends and family, consider this. Do you want to be responsible for someone you love losing their life savings? Damn. That's intense. If you take this route, you must be clear with your network that more than 50% of startups fail in the first 2 years. So statistically, the odds are against them. For this reason, it is important not to take too much money from one person. Spread out the risk and make sure that those who invest can actually afford to lose the money. What I would like to see in the future is more underestimated founders being able to use this kind of fundraising if they choose to. The more successful underestimated founders there are, the more those founders can invest in other underestimated founders and tip the scales in terms of who has access to this type of network. After the friend and families round, founders will typically turn to angel investors, people who have a certain amount of personal capital they would like to invest, usually in exchange for an ownership stake of anywhere between less than 1% to 10% of the company. Angel investors must be accredited, which means, according to SEC criteria, they either have a net worth of $1 million, earn a minimum of $200,000 per year, or earn a minimum of $300,000 combined income with a spouse. When working with angel investors, it is important to make sure that you have a good founder-investor fit. Don't blindly take money because it is offered and you need it. Look into the person's investment philosophy, their values, and their agenda. If you are not aligned on these things, you will not be aligned on the important decisions that impact your business. Okay, so hi, if y'all are just joining in, we're reading Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton, who is a successful venture capitalist founder. She's raised millions of dollars. She's a multi-million dollar founder, and she invests in underrepresented founders and CEOs and startups. And so I felt like I've talked about this earlier in the live, but I feel like it's really important, especially where the economy is on a global scale and at a micro level. I'm domestically based in the United States, and I think right now is like the perfect stage for founders from underrepresented communities to invest in their financial literacy and, take a piece of the American dream pie. You know what I'm saying? And like, I think that's my favorite thing about being American is that anyone at this stage in time can found an LLC. Anyone can start an S corp. Anyone can start a business. And so I think the knowledge that we're getting from this book, which we are like essentially halfway through. I know like next Monday will be the last time we read this book together. We will be reading another one for November though. But I think that the main value from this book is just arming us with the knowledge that I don't think is as accessible. Everything that she's talking about right now, angel investors, venture capital, equity, all of that stuff, it's just not something that is really easily accessible, especially if you don't come from an education or familial background where that knowledge is commonplace. And like, I was just thinking about this the other day, like in terms of like debt and credit, and a lot of stuff I've had to teach myself on my own. I'd say another resource I like is I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. He's a really great personal finance educator. He has a podcast. I think he has a show on Netflix as well. But if you are interested in, tackling your debt and like growing your financial autonomy, especially as a young person, his resources really help, because if you grow up in a background where everybody is used to just owing credit card companies, everybody is used to dodging, bill collectors on the phone, like that's the environment that you grew up from, it can be intimidating to say, hey, I want to do something different. I don't want to go through my life owing people money. I don't want to go through my life feeling like I don't have different streams of income to fall back on. And yeah, it takes time, but I think the most powerful decision that you can make, because today's theme is expansion, the most powerful decision you can make to financially expand, especially as a young person, especially as a woman. I'm a Black woman, I'm an African woman, and so for us, particularly the best decision you can make is to just act on that intention. First, make the decision, I'm going to be different from the environment that I grew up in. I'm going to be different from the mistakes of my parents, the mistakes of my aunts and uncles, and I'm going to take ownership of my finances and do so that I can be a great resource not only for my family and my friends, but also for people who may not know me, for people who come from similar backgrounds and similar communities. And so that's a personal decision I made for myself, and that's what made me gravitate towards this book in particular, especially for our inaugural book club choice. So I hope you guys are enjoying. We only have a few minutes or so left of the live, and so we are almost done with this chapter, and then this is a lengthy chapter. Oh my gosh. Oh wow, this one is very long. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll just finish this chapter, and we have like some pages left, and then I'll hop off live. But I do want to tell y'all a little bit about, before we get back to reading the book, I am launching the Alaere Manifesto magazine. And this will be the November issue. And so Alaere Manifesto is a magazine concept I came up with because I was like, there's so much that I want to talk about for women who choose to rebel against patriarchal subjugation, and for even men too, but like my company is a lifestyle brand targeted towards women, especially young women, and I'd say the best way I can describe the Alaere Manifesto magazine is a cross between Teen Vogue and the Black Panther newspaper. It is discussing things that are rebellious, in the sense of not really taking into account a lot of what society is pushing onto young women. This idea that a woman's place is in the kitchen, or that women are second class citizens, or that women were created to be less than men. I think a lot of that ideology can seep into how we choose to engage with our finances, how we choose to engage with our own goals and aspirations. And so I think that my magazine for me right now is just a way to combat that. And I think about, movements historically in America, like the Black Panther movement, which really inspired me. And then I think about women like Gloria Steinem. I think about the early feminist movements where consciousness raising programs were a big thing as well. And so I do want to engage with that in a way that engages with material and topics and subject matter that directly affects women. And I want to do so from a decolonized, Afro-feminine perspective. So if any of that resonates with you, go on over to www.AlaereLifestyle.com, and when you sign up for the newsletter, not only do you get 10% off from your first purchase from my store, but you will get notified when the first issue of the Alaere Manifesto magazine is available for purchase this month. Okay. Stephen Usher, hey, welcome back. Thanks for joining in the chat. Okay, he says cha feels. I don't know what that means, but we're gonna get back to this chapter because it is a lengthy one, but it's really important. And this chapter is called Owning Your Company. Okay, so Arlen Hamilton says, don't blindly take money because it is offered and you need it. Look into the person's investment philosophy, their values, their agenda. If you are not aligned on these things, you will not be aligned on the important decisions that impact your business. Another type of investor is known as a family office. These consist of either one family or a group of families who are very wealthy and have hired someone to invest their wealth for them and then manage those investments. Generally, these family offices aren't talked about much, and you would need a very warm introduction to get in touch with one. So few underrepresented founders end up taking this route. The positive side of family offices is that they can make decisions and write checks very quickly, and those checks can be as large as those signed by a venture fund. This is another route that I hope to diversify in the future by creating generational wealth in Black communities. I hope to see many more Black family offices created and to see them investing in underestimated founders. Me too. Me too. Okay, Stephen Usher says, I feel you. Okay, so you vibing with the message. I love that. Make sure you like the live and invite your friends and your family to join, to subscribe, because I really love talking about subject matter like this, and I do think that people from underrepresented backgrounds deserve to build generational wealth, and Black people built this country, so why not? Why not? Anyways, going back, let me not get too James Baldwin on y'all. Let's get back to the book. The most well-known type of startup investment is venture capital, aka VC. Uh-oh. I thought I heard something. Okay, venture capital funds invest the money of other high wealth individuals who have invested in their fund. For this reason, venture funds also do their own fundraising. You may be able to raise a large sum of money through the venture capital option, but often for a high price in terms of your equity. There is a structure to venture fundraising. You begin with pre-seed funding, then seed funding, and then series funding, A, B, C, etc. A seed round is essentially just a round of fundraising, and the more rounds you have, the more you are diluting your equity. You also have a lot more people to answer to, and the expectations of those people will be higher because more money will be at stake. Let me know in the chat if you've ever thought about going through venture capital fundraising, or you have experience in this realm of business. Share your thoughts in the chat. Okay. When a venture fund invests in your company, they don't hope to just make their money back plus a little extra. They generally expect you to make 10 times their investment or more. They will expect you to grow the business rapidly in order to do so. We talked about this with Nasty Gal. Go check that out. Something like a brainstorming team, says Stephen Usher. Yeah, like I feel like we're really, incubating here. We're really making the knowledge accessible, which I love. I love that. Okay. They will expect you to grow the business rapidly in order to do so. For some venture capitalists, anything less than that is perceived as a failure. Whew. Almost 50% of all public companies are venture capital backed. But what most people don't realize is that public companies are only a small slice of the market. In fact, less than 1% of all US companies are publicly traded, which means that only a small percentage of companies overall receive venture capital funding. Interesting. I didn't know that. There's such a media circus around venture capital, and so especially when I go on my LinkedIn feed, because of my network, I'm like, dang, it seems like everybody's always doing seed funding or whatever, or seed fundraising rounds. So I am inundated with so much of that I think sometimes I do forget that there's a lot of companies that choose to remain privately owned. So I'm sure she's going to talk about that, but just wanted to interject. But because venture capital is the most well-known of the fundraising options, it receives outsized attention in the media and is glamorized in movies and TV programs. It would be easy to assume it is your only choice when you're just starting out. It is really important to understand that venture capital is not the only way to fund your business. It is one option, and it may even be the right one for your company, but it is not the only option. Stephen Usher says corporations always get a percentage no matter what. What do you mean? Expand on that. Expand on that statement before I say whether I agree or disagree. Because if you're a privately owned company, that is your company. No corporation is going to be able to control you. And that's what she was talking about in this book, maintaining your equity. So if you maintain 100% equity in your company, there's not going to be a venture capital fund or corporation or anybody that can tell you how to manage your company. But now if you do take fundraising from a venture capital firm or take investments from outside sources in exchange for equity, then they will get a percentage. And then if you choose to be publicly traded, then you will have to answer to a lot more people than if you are a privately owned company. Okay, so when you are starting a company, it is my advice that you hold out as long as possible and explore as many other options as possible before looking to venture capital for money. If you start asking for huge checks at the get-go, you will likely need to continue in that fashion in order to grow at the rate that your investors will want you to grow. This means that you are going to be left with very little equity and a lot of people to answer to. You could even be fired as the CEO of your own company if your equity is too diluted. So if control is important to you, be very careful about going this way. If you're really into this subject matter, another resource, well, I guess it's kind of like a resource that I would recommend if you want to have a more stylized, idea of the venture capital world, I would say check out that show, We Crashed, which is a fictional portrayal of WeWork and the whole story of that. And the founder, and I think his name is Adam Newman, was actually pushed out. Okay, so let's check into the chat. Steven, I don't know if you're being disrespectful here, but I will block you if you are being disrespectful, because this comment does not seem very appropriate, so I don't appreciate it. This is a high vibrational space, and we are talking about how to raise our vibration and how to expand our mind. And I think this is a perfect segue to talk about how women who, even when we are pursuing intellectual pursuits, we're pursuing business pursuits, and we are literally like being serious with our lives and with our financial literacy, we are still reduced to sex objects. So Stephen Usher decided to leave a comment here that says, I don't like to pull out though, if you know what I mean, which I am now forced to interpret as a sexual innuendo. Not cool. This is not OnlyFans. If you want to talk like that to a woman on live, go to OnlyFans. I'm not a prostitute. I'm not an OnlyFans creator. I'm a businesswoman and a published author. So if you want to be welcomed on my channel, you need to approach me with respect. Okay? All right. Thank you. Because don't make me get into Professor Pesu mode. I don't play all that. Alrighty. Like I'm ATL. I don't play that. So let's get back to the book. All right now, Stephen, because you was making some sexual innuendos, but you've now said it's more like stocks. Okay. Because I don't play that one. I feel like I could easily go into Claire Huxtable mode. Y'all remember that episode of The Cosby Show where Elvis was like talking to Claire Huxtable? It was like, I didn't know you did that kind of thing. When she offered Bill Cosby's character, Cliff Huxtable, she offered him some coffee, and Elvis was like, I didn't know you served your man. And Claire Huxtable went off. Don't tempt me, y'all. Because I really dislike how women are treated sometimes. Also, my selfie light just went out, so we're going to probably wrap up very soon. But I'm still gonna keep going, even though the lighting has changed, but I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Let me know what y'all think. But so if you start asking for huge checks at the get-go, you will likely need to continue in that fashion in order to grow at the rate your investors will want you to grow. This means that you're going to be left with very little equity and a lot of people to answer to. You could even be fired as the CEO of your own company if your equity is too diluted. So if control is important to you, be very careful about going this way. Even though I am a venture capitalist, bootstrapping is my favorite kind of fundraising. Bootstrapping involves relying on sources of income that you own, such as revenue from sales and your own savings, rather than outside investments to fund your company for as long as you can. Bootstrapping simply means funding a company without taking any outside investment, which allows the founder to have as much control over their business as possible and to hold onto their equity for as long as possible. So hi, if you're just coming into the chat or into the live stream, we're reading Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton, and my selfie light just died. The pain. But I do think that, we're having a really good conversation here. Let me know if y'all want me to finish this chapter. I did intend to hop off at 5, but I'm really flipping, and like this is how much left of this chapter that we have. So I do think that I'm going to wrap it up. Like I'll just read one more page and then leave y'all with some action items that y'all can take, and then head on out of the live, because the lighting matters. It does. But yeah, let's continue talking about bootstrapping, because that's how I'm growing my business right now. Okay, so bootstrapping simply means funding a company without taking out any outside investment, which allows the founder to have as much control over their business as possible and to hold onto their equity for as long as possible. So much of what we read about startups in books, business press, and other media creates the impression that from day one, the primary job of a founder is to raise capital. This is misleading. There are plenty of other things a founder can and often should do to launch and grow their business, other than court investors and raise money. Interesting. So before thinking about how quickly you can raise a round on day one, think about your first customers, your business model, creating the best possible product, and what kind of team you want to have sitting next to you on day 1000. Bootstrapping makes it easier to stay true to your original ideas and to be beholden to no one but your customers and yourself. As the founder, you should be the person who knows the most about your business and your industry. This means that if you get to a point where you can see that the marketplace is changing or that something you are doing isn't working and you need to pivot, you can go ahead and do that without having to get permission or buy-in from investors. With no investors to answer to, you can spend less time selling investors on your vision and more time talking to your customers, fine-tuning your product, and working on making that vision a reality. Yeah, pretty much. I've spoken to so many founders who have had to ask for permission from their larger investors before they make a decision that, in my opinion, they shouldn't even need to ask about. Never forget that you are the expert in your company. When you take venture capital, you immediately have a boss. But if you're an entrepreneur, you probably prefer to be your own boss. That is partially why you got into this, right? With venture capital, you are beholden to other people's ideas of success. You are held to someone else's benchmarks, and if you don't grow your company tenfold, it is considered a failure, even if you have thousands of loyal customers. Can you imagine if we held all other businesses to the standard? Oh, you didn't make more than 10 times the amount of money you made last year. What a failure. The bottom line is that you are the founder, which means that you are the one who gets to decide what success looks like. So, yeah, I'm gonna read this last page and then head on out. What I think a lot of people miss in my story is that while I have raised a few $1,000,000 from investors and generated millions of dollars in revenue since I started backstage, I've also bootstrapped companies to keep the lights on. When I started my podcast, Your First Million, I was offered money, which I turned down. I wanted to ensure the podcast remained exactly how I wanted it to be. Bootstrapping can mean having to scrimp and save, but you get to retain your ownership along with the freedom to make mistakes, learn from them, and move on. It takes longer, of course, but the slow pace allows you to grow intentionally and iterate as you go, rather than try to scale as quickly as possible, often before you are ready, to meet some impossible standard of growth. Plus, in the extra time you give yourself to learn the ropes, you're also leveling up your talent. I think we need to start changing the way we look at outside capital as being the best source of funding. Okay, so that is just midway through the chapter Owning Your Company. We're on page 83 of Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton. And I'm about to hop off live, but I feel like we had a really great conversation in today's live. Yeah, I think like it's always really great to engage with financial literacy, financial agency, especially for the woman who subscribed to this channel. I want you to know that a man is not a plan, and having financial knowledge does not strip you of your divine feminine energy. In fact, there's a divine feminine archetype called the sage archetype that is really about feeding into your wisdom, investing in your mind. And so I think that reading books like this is just really important, especially for women who want to found businesses, women who have dreams of entrepreneurship, and women who are interested in learning about investments, venture capital, and just private equity and all of those different really cool topics in business. But before I go, I want to encourage y'all to check out my company, AlaereLifestyle.com, where I sell my original artwork and I sell my original fashion designs. And so I'm also an author of a book called Force of Nature by Odemi Pesu, which is available globally, but you can check it out on Amazon, which I'd say is like the easiest option, or Waterstones if you're in Europe, and then Booktopia if you're in Australia and like that part of the world. But I love y'all so much. Thank you for, supporting me in this way. Every time that I come on live, I sometimes get a little bit nervous, I'm not gonna lie, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to reach people, but today I think it was, let me scroll back up in the chat, Kim Dokja was tuning in from Iraq today, and like we had people from Brazil today, we had people from Iraq, like we're building a global community, and I think that this is a global movement that I am engaging in with this company, a movement to encourage people to honor their divine identity, their divine identities as, you know, people who were created in the image of God. And so many women have been taught and raised to view man as their God, or to view materialism and consumerism as their God, when God's power is within you and it's innate. And so I do think that, you know, filling your mind with a wealth and abundance mindset can empower you to use your imagination in ways that can not only help you change your life for the better, but help you to create generational wealth that can create a ripple effect across generations. And so, you know, as women, we really have that power to make a change across generations. The portal of life is within us. Like, we bring life into the world. And so I don't think that's any Jos Lele type of something that we have. Like, that's something that is really powerful. And whether or not you choose to birth a child or birth a business or birth a book, like, you're still able to produce things and do so with that divine feminine energy and that life force energy pushing you forward. And so I really hope that the messages and the discourse that we've engaged with today can inspire y'all and embolden you to go forth and make a difference in your community, to innovate in the industries that you're interested in. I could talk so much more about my journey as a founder. It's still ongoing, and everything she talked about right now about like bootstrapping, all of that, I totally resonate. And, you know, there's things I'm learning in real time that I'm also, you know, sharing with y'all. But Alaere does mean queen. Alaere means queen in Ijaw, which is my mom's native language. And when it comes to being a queen and embodying a queen mindset, paramount to that is being sovereign, you know, and having sovereignty and having agency and having autonomy. And so if you're building your queendom and you're building your legacy right now as a woman, I hope that Alaere Lifestyle can empower and inspire you through our art, which you can check out. You can shop at www.AlaereLifestyle.com, but also through my literature, Force of Nature and the Alaere Manifesto magazine, launching this month. And, you know, through my fashion designs, which encourage you to go out into this world vibrantly and with color and, you know, honoring what makes you unique. And so I'm just really happy to have y'all here. I encourage you to subscribe if you like topics like this. If you enjoyed the Alaere Book Club, I go live with a book every Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Just a really great way to start off the week, you know, with some high vibrational, expansive thought leadership. Let me check into the chat. And Eric says lovely hand gestures. Oh gosh, well, thank you. But yeah, you know, and every day moving forward, I will be, well, every day other than Monday, I will be live painting pieces that will be part of the wearable art collection through Alaere Lifestyle, where you can commission, and then I'll also be painting some really cool vintage pieces and some original pieces. And I'm taking y'all basically along the journey behind the scenes as I expand my fashion line. But if you do want to support me and my journey, I've placed the Alaere Lifestyle Business Cash App in the description. Any donation, any gift makes a difference and helps me get closer to doing a few things. One, expanding my fashion line, and two, opening a physical retail space where we can have conversations and discourse like this and programming like this in person, where I can do art exhibits and artist talks and have different guests from my network come and share their expertise as well. And so that is something I'm working towards, and I do think that it will be a really positive addition to the Atlanta community. So if you do want to support that, you can do so through the Alaere Lifestyle Cash App. My name, or my company's name on Cash App, is Alaere Lifestyle. And any donation that you make over $20 will enter you into a raffle to win an original painting of mine valued at over $5,000. So I put more of that in the description of the live. Definitely check it out. And I thank you in advance for any support that you show my company in that way. Or if you want to order one of my artworks, like I said, www.AlaereLifestyle.com. I feel like an infomercial right now, but like I just want to let y'all know like how to support me and how to support my company. If you really do enjoy my artwork and you want to experience a little bit of my energy in your home, the best way to do so is through collecting my artwork. Okay, so let's check the chat. Eric says your self-esteem is attractive. Thank you. I like to think so as well. You know, self-esteem, self-confidence, knowledge, that's your power, ladies. It really is. Okay, y'all. So I'm sending y'all so much love, so much light. I hope y'all have a fabulous week ahead, and I will be back from my art studio tomorrow. Eric says your expressions are attractive. Thank you. Thank you. See, guys, there's a way to compliment somebody in a respectful way. I'm open to the compliments. I really am. I appreciate them. But like, you know, also make sure we stay respectful. So Eric, I'm not talking about you, but there have been incidents on the live a few times where, you know, people are being a little bit sexual. And it doesn't make me feel comfortable because like I said, this one is not OnlyFans. It's not OnlyFans. So this is Alaere Lifestyle TV. Okay, so high vibrational. We keep it classy over here. And I'm just really happy to have y'all. Okay. Bisu, 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 bisu. Bye, y'all. I'll see y'all tomorrow.